Welcome to our gathering tonight. Here we share stories of ordinary people who have experienced extraordinary things. Sit back, relax, and warm yourself by Jim Harold's Campfire.
Welcome to the Campfire. I am Jim Harold. So glad to be with you. And if you're new around these parts, what we do is we simply host real folks telling real paranormal stories. Could be ghosts, could be UFOs, could be cryptid creatures, but they are true and they are amazing. So welcome to our electronic campfire. Now, we need storytellers. So please, if you have a story, submissions are currently open at jimharold.com/campfire. That's jimharold.com/campfire. You sign up, Dar will get back to you and we'll get it on the books. And looking forward to it. Now, one quick note, we're adding something new next week. We will have the audio edition just as always. Nothing changes. The flow of the program, nothing changes. If you like audio and you say, hey, I like to listen to the campfire, I don't want to watch it, fine. And I suspect that's going to be about 98% of our audience. However, if you like the idea of seeing some of the callers and seeing me go over these stories, next week, we will, in addition to the audio version, we will have a video version. So let me be very clear. If you want to sign up, you do not have to show your video. You do not have to agree to that. That is not a condition at all. Because I know some people, if we put that stipulation in there, they're going to say, hey, I don't want to do that, which I totally understand. There might be reasons of confidentiality. People might be shy. They might not be comfortable on camera. They might not have the equipment. That is fine. Still sign up because the video version then will just be like a radio show being taped where just the hosts are seen, where I would just be seen. Of course, there will be the option when you sign up. If you feel comfortable, you can say yes, and we will show your video if you're comfortable with that. So it's really your choice. So nothing has changed. We're just adding. And the video version will be available on YouTube and very likely also available on Spotify. The only thing about that is the audio version will still be available on Spotify as well. So do not worry. So audio is not changing at all. It's not going away. We're just adding the video option too, and that'll be on next week's show. We've been recording those video conversations for about a month now. And really excited about it because this month marks the 16th anniversary of Campfire. And something I've always tried to do with my shows is do something new and something exciting and not just stay in a rut. So that's what we're doing, but we're still keeping what makes Campfire special. Stories like this one. Next up on the Campfire is Mike from Illinois. Now, actually, he's not a listener to the show, but his nephew Josiah said, let's get you on the show and tell this remarkable UFO story. Mike told me, may never hear another one like it. I can't wait to hear it, and we're so glad to have him with us today. Mike, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us, and tell us what happened.
Well, thank you for having me. Yes, December 12th, 1983, 42 years ago, my brother Jeff and I and a friend of ours went Christmas shopping in Rockford, Illinois. I lived in a small town called Byron, about 10 minutes from Rockford. We were coming back from Rockford on an old country road called Montague Road, about 7:30 at night. My brother Jeff was driving. I'm in the passenger seat, and Robert's in the back seat. And right out of nowhere, this object had fell out of the sky, and it was moving so fast it had a light tail behind it. This thing had to have been going 1,000 miles an hour.
Wow!
My brother Jeff slammed on the brakes because it almost hit our car. He slammed on the brakes. And this object, instead of hitting the ground like it should have, it created a big hole in the ground. It just stopped, a dead stop, about 20 feet from the ground.
Huh.
So now our car stopped. We're looking at this object, which is about 100 yards away. There's red, blue, green lights flashing all the way around it. This thing should have hit the ground, and it didn't. Now I put my window down in the car, and this thing is absolutely silent. There's no engine, no motor, no nothing. Now, we watched it sit there for 2 or 3 minutes, and then all of a sudden, real slow, it took off flying. Now,
So did it not actually hit the ground? It was like suspended?
Yes, sir. It was just like it fell out of the ground or fell out of the sky and made a dead stop before it hit the ground.
Wow.
And this
So it
thing was
went
moving
down and whoosh and stop and was kind of hovering kind of thing.
yes, sir. It just hovered there with the lights blinking around it.
Wow.
So we're watching this thing. I put the window down in my car and there's no sound. There's no engine, no motor. Well, so we're watching it, then all of a sudden it takes off flying real slow. And my brother Jeff says, "Man, we got to follow this thing." So we took off driving. We knew which direction it was going, but Montague Road, wasn't a straight shot. So we get about 3 miles down the road, and I said, "There it is. It stopped again. It stopped again out in the middle of this cut down cornfield full of snow." I said, "There it is." So we turned again on another road, and we're sitting there looking at this object um, down in the snowfield, and we watched it sit there for probably 5 or 10 minutes as it was blinking down there. Well, then all of a sudden, Jim, it takes off. It comes up real slow in the air, comes up straight up in the air and stops, and then it starts coming towards our car. Now, at this point, I said, "We got to get out of the car." So they look at this thing, and when it came over, it could not have been more perfectly above our car. Whatever it was, knew that we were there because we stood directly underneath of it. And when it flew over our car, it had three distinctive lights in a triangle shape, one, two, three in a triangle shape. And as we stood under it and looked straight up at it, it was like a kite flying over. There was no motor, there was no engine, there was no humming sound. So this thing glided over the top of our car. The lights were very visible, but it was just high enough to where we couldn't see the body of it. So anyway, it comes over the car real slow, like a big kite, and it comes over. Now it's on my side of the car, and it just stops there. And we're watching it, and it hovers there for a while. Then it moves up here real fast, about 20 yards, and then shot down real slow. Moved over here about 30 yards. It did just kind of dancing around, I called it, in the sky there. Well, then we watched it. At this point, it took off flying north towards Rockford, towards the Wisconsin state line, and we got our eyeball on it, and we're not
Yeah.
going to leave until we don't see this thing no more. Um, and like every night in the sky, you see an airplane going across the sky. Well, there was this airplane going across the sky. This object that almost hit our car that we've been watching for a while started getting closer and closer and closer to this airplane. And my brother says, "Man, it's going to crash into that airplane." Well, it didn't. But they got so close together that the one we'd been watching took off. The one that we thought was an airplane came all the way over to the car where the other one was. So there was actually two of them.
Wow.
We watched this second object come over to where the other one had just left. It sat there for a while, blinking. It moved up here real slow. It moved down here real fast. We watched the second one do it for about 15 minutes, and then it took off north towards Rockford. So at this point, we lost sight of the second one. So my brother Jeff turns the car around. We go back home. My mom and dad are in the living room watching TV. We come flying in the house, telling them, "You're not going to believe what we just seen north of town." Well, they could tell that we were very serious. My dad gets on the phone and calls the Rockford airport.
Uh-huh.
And whoever he spoke to at the airport says, "Who exactly am I speaking to?" Well, I'll tell you why, because the Rockford Airport picked it up on their radar screen. They had these
Whoa.
two objects on the radar screen that they didn't know what they were. So my father gave them our phone number and stuff. And I can't remember if it was the next day or the day after, but the phone rings and I answer it. "Hello. Yeah, is Mike or Jeff Goodwin there?" And I said, "Well, this is Mike." He says, "My name is Harry Eckert from Washington, D.C." He says, "We understand that you boys witnessed something north of town." And I said, "Yes, sir, we did." And he went on to say that there's some people from Washington that would like to talk to you.
Oh boy.
He said, one of which is a gentleman named J. Allen Hynek.
Oh, J. Allen Hynek. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know who he is.
I know who he is. Yes.
Well, I'd never heard the name before in my life. But anyway, he says, "Could you meet us in Rockford at the Clock Tower Inn at 3 o'clock on Friday?" I said, "Yes, sir, we'll be there." So anyway, so we go to me, Jeff, and Robert go to the Clock Tower Inn in Rockford. We're sitting there, 18, 17 years old, not knowing what to expect. And all of a sudden, here come pulling in this big black stretch limousine. These guys get out of the car, and it was nothing shorter than the X-Files. They had the black briefcases and the black suits, and this one gentleman got out of the car. He had on a wool fur hat, like one of them Russian hats. Well, that ended
Yeah.
up being Jim Heineck. They came to the clock tower indoor, and we didn't realize they were there, but all the major news stations were there, WREX, Channel 17, Channel 13, and they tried to interview us, but the guys from Washington says, there'll be no interviews right now. Please back up, and we're going to interview these boys. So they introduced themselves and took us back into a meeting room, and they sat down and talked to us. They were making drawings and they were interviewing us. One guy was drawing pictures of what we were saying. And but one thing I remember the most, Jim, about the interview was they were very, very curious about the lights. Tell us about how the lights were blinking. Were they sporadic or were they, in a pattern? And we all told them, about the lights. About 5 minutes later, they said, "Tell us about the lights again." And I'm like, well, I thought to myself, I just told you, but they were very, very interested in
They
the
wanted
lights.
to make sure you were being consistent in what you were saying, I think, and to get more details, I'm guessing.
Yes, sir. So they said after interviewing us there, they said, how far away from where we are right now did this object almost hit your car? And we said, well, we can be there in about 15 minutes. Dr. Heineck says, take us there. So I'm the oldest one. I'm 18. J.L. Heineck says, Mike, will you ride with us in the limousine? I said, sure, I'd love to. So Jeff and Robert got in their car. I rode in a limousine with these guys and followed Jeff and Robert to the spot where it almost hit our car. J.L. Heineck pulls out a mini tape recorder and says, Mike, do you mind if I tape record your story? And I said, no. So the story I'm telling you right now is the one that J.L. Heineck tape recorded 42 years ago when I was 18 years old. So we get to the spot where it happened. We all get out of the car. They had us 3 boys stand there and point our finger up in the air, and they took pictures of us. And then they said, this whole hour-long event, it was over an hour from the first time it almost hit our car to the time it was over. It was like over an hour. He says, during this whole time, where was it closest to the snow? And we all agreed that it was on Conger Road when it came up and over our car was where it was closest to the snow. And they said, take us there. So we got back in our cars and we followed Jeff and Robert. We got to the spot and I pointed, I said, it was right out there. So 2 of the guys with their briefcases crossed the barbed wire fence and trudged out there in the snowfield. While they did that, Dr. Heineck says, I'd like to interview all 3 of you boys separately. So he walks Robert down the road a little bit, and then they come back. And then he got my brother Jeff, and he walked down the road with Jeff and come back. And then it was my turn. And he was just talking to me, and I asked him a question. I said, Dr. Heineck, will they ever figure out what these are? And his answer to me was, Mike, they will in your time, but they won't in mine. And he died 3 years later.
Wow.
But
wow.
So anyway, so after that, the guys come back from the snowfield with their briefcases. And what they did out there, I'm not sure because I wasn't with them.
Maybe they got samples of the snow. Did you ever think
about they're looking for maybe indentations in the snow or what? But they came back, they shook our hands, and we parted ways, and I never heard another word about it ever again. Now, it did make the Rockford paper, the Rockford Register Star, like two or three times. I still got the articles here at the house. That particular night, Jim, not only did we witness what we witnessed for over an hour, and not only did the Rockford Airport pick it up on the radar screen, there was a lady in Belvedere, Illinois, which is about 30 miles away, that called in reporting 2 triangle-shaped objects in the sky. There was another person from Rockford, Illinois, that reported 2 strange lights in the sky, and also another person in Byron, Illinois. So those objects were definitely there. They did not know what they were, but I will tell you this. I'll go to my grave knowing that what I seen that night was not from here. There's no way.
Yeah, I mean, that's remarkable. That's remarkable. That shoots down and it hovers. You think it's going to hit the ground and it just hovers, and all the other things that you said.
Yeah, nothing falling out of the sky that fast with a light tail behind it can stop that fast without hitting the earth.
Right.
The G-force alone would have shattered everything
Yeah.
inside.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to maybe feel good to see all the UFO stuff in the news now and know, that you're kind of vindicated and that maybe things are progressing. Maybe what Hynek said about it being in your time, maybe we're closer to that. I hope so.
I honestly believe we are, Jim. I watch a lot of the documentaries and the things on TV, and I believe we're actually coming to the point. And I tell a lot of my friends, I say, I bet you within, I want to say within the next, I want to go out there and say within the next 5 years, they're actually going to come out, and admit that they've been hiding this, for years. Yeah, so there's an old saying, seeing is believing. And when you see something like I did, there's no doubt in your mind.
Yep. Well, sir, thank you so much. I'm so glad you decided to bring the story to the campfire. Appreciate it very much, and thank you for in the early days standing up and saying that I did see this. It takes a lot of guts, and thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. Now, and I will be listening now. Thank you so much.
Next up on the campfire is Brad from San Francisco, California. He's going to take us back to his childhood years. Something that happened with his friend that he'll never forget. And once you hear it, you'll know why. Brad, welcome to the show. Tell us what happened.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. This is probably back when I was 11 or 12 years old. I had a best friend named Jesse at the time. Both of us lived on Vandenberg Air Force Base. Both of our fathers were in military. And he stayed over one night. And by the way, I'm 50 now, so it was that long ago. But he stayed over one night. We were watching Saturday Night Live, and I was sitting in a chair that was square looking at the TV. Beyond that was a window to the backyard. The TV was against the window. Jesse was on my right, but he was kind of at a 90-degree angle. So he could actually see the TV itself, of course, and then what was behind me, which was the hallway going into the main bedroom area that connected directly into our kitchen, all of which was behind my back. So we're watching Saturday Night Live, and he just got this white look on his face. All the color drained from his face, and he looked terrified. And I said to him, "Let me guess what you just saw." And he said, "Yeah, what?" And I said, "You saw something dart from the hallway into the kitchen." And then I described what I had seen probably about 3 or 4 times prior to that, which was, and it's going to sound kind of silly, but it was about 4 feet tall. And it looked like there's an old Mad Magazine comic, Spy versus Spy,
Yeah.
where there was the white spy and a black spy. This one looked like the black spy, had a trench coat, a hat, kind of in the 50s style. And he was pulling the trench coat up around his chin, like he was trying to be surreptitious or something like that. But again, he just darted from the hallway into the kitchen. And Jesse just lost it. That's exactly what he saw. I have no idea why that thing was doing what it was doing. Like I said, I'd seen it 3 or 4 times before, and it's always running from the hallway into the kitchen. So anyway, years and years later, I looked him up randomly on Facebook. We had lost touch, and I randomly contacted him. We don't keep in touch with one another. It's just basically I check in every once in a while what he's up to. And I wrote to him one day and I said, "I hope you don't think I'm a weirdo in my adulthood." But do you remember that night when we saw that thing running from the hallway into the kitchen?
Yeah.
And he got back to me within the day, and he's like, "No way." He's like, "I literally was just telling my wife that story the other day."
Wow.
So he remembered it. But I have no idea what it was. To me, it felt very 40s, like kind of a wartime spy. Um, but yeah, that's my story.
So you now your father was in the Air Force. You were in base housing. So do
Correct.
you think that played into it?
Definitely, yeah. And again, I don't know what it would have. To me, it felt very old. I did look up when those houses were built, and it was the house that we were in specifically was built in the 50s. So I'm not sure what
Yeah.
that was all about, but it was quite disturbing to both of us at the time.
Yeah, spy versus spy. Yeah, I remember that. No, that's pretty wild. And again, I just, we talk about ghosts and different things that we see, and I always think about the nature of reality. And what is the nature of reality and the glimpses that we see? What are we seeing a glimpse of? I don't know. I don't know the answer, but it's just really, really interesting. Well, Brad, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you for being a part of the campfire today.
My pleasure, Jim. Stay spooky.
Stay spooky. Jim Harold's Campfire is brought to you by Liquid IV, and I think it's so important in our daily lives to remember to care for ourselves and love ourselves and have little indulgences from time to time. For example, this week, and I think it was $15, but I ordered some classic cartoons off of one of the online sites just to add to my DVD collection. A small thing, but something that just kind of made me happy. And love looks different for everyone. And one thing that you should do to show love to yourself is stay hydrated. It's the everyday indulgence of extraordinary hydration, and you can get that from Liquid IV. Powered by Live Hydra Science, visit liquidiv.com and fall in love with the flavors like the zesty new hydration multiplier, sugar-free raspberry lemonade, and use code CAMPFIRE to save 20% off your first order. Now, in fact, all this talk about Liquid IV has made me thirsty, so I am just going to go ahead and prep one right now and have a little taste. Excuse me. Tear, pour in the powder. Now for the best part, the drinking. That's my go-to lemon lime, but there are so many different flavors from acai berry to pina colada. And then you can also try their sugar-free flavors like raspberry lemonade, white peach, and rainbow sherbet. And Liquid IV is great because it can help you stay hydrated during those long days, enjoying outdoor sports. If you stayed out kind of late, that might be helpful as well. But it is a great thing, and we love it at the Harold household, and it is Dar's favorite. So break the mold and own your own ritual. Just one stick and 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. And they have this optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. 8 essential vitamins and nutrients, always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. Treat yourself to extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code CAMPFIRE at checkout. That's 20% off your first order with code CAMPFIRE at liquidiv.com. And thank you, Liquid IV. Would you like to keep up with paranormal news, UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, but have a little dash of humor thrown in? Well, you need to listen to the Paranormal Report. It is with me and Dar Harold. We've been doing it since, I think, September of last year. We're having a great time. The show is growing. People are loving it. And you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, so on and so forth. It is a free show, so I hope you'll check it out. It is called The Paranormal Report with me and Dar Harold. Dar brings her opinion to the table, and she keeps me in line, too. We hope to bring you some great information and also a smile. Check it out. And now back to the campfire. Well, we have a very unusual situation here, and it's really cool. Courtney from Missouri is on the line, and she has a story. She used to do haunted history tours in college, and some strangeness ensued. But before we get going, I got to mention this. Most of the times I ask people, how long have you been listening? No, 2 years, a year, 5 years, 10 years. Courtney said, I've never not listened to an episode. Tyler from the Minds of Madness podcast recommended us and said Courtney should tell her story on the campfire. So I hope after this, Courtney will actually listen to an episode, but I really appreciate Courtney. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All righty. So the way we do it here is I just ask you to tell your story, and that's what you do. So tell us what happened.
So I was doing haunted history tours in college. I was being paid $100 a night to do 2 tours on Friday and Saturday nights.
That's pretty good college money. That's pretty good college money.
Great college money. So can't really beat that. So my role in the tour was to be the caboose. So I walked behind the group and just took a head count. But then toward the end of the tour, my job was to be basically one step ahead of the group because we ended in this massive courthouse. So at our last stop, I would then walk about a block ahead and go into this courthouse and get the door unlocked to let all the guests in. And then as we were in the courthouse, my job was to then be one floor ahead of the group to unlock that floor's door because it was really locked down. The courthouse is located in Carlinville, Illinois. It's $1 million courthouse. So it's pretty famous. It's very ornate. It's very large for being in a rural town. So that was the big selling point of these tours was getting to go into this courthouse. So I would then go one floor ahead of the group so I could unlock the doors and let everybody in. And there were 3 total floors in this courtroom or in this courthouse. And then the very last floor was the biggest courtroom. It looked like a church. There were stained glass windows, pews, and it was huge.
Mm-hmm.
So I would come up this back door, and every single night I did this. So twice a night I would walk through this courthouse by myself through the first floor, get all the guests in, walk up to the second floor, get all the guests into the second floor, go up to the third floor. I would then go behind the judge's desk in the courtroom where there were 2 doors leading into the main courtroom. And I would then turn on all the lights in the courtroom, shut this massive iron door behind me, and then walk all the way down the length of the courtroom to open up the main doors to let everybody in. And then the tour from there would just be the tour guide and myself talking about famous cases that came through the courthouse. And
may I just say one thing real quick? You are way braver than I am. I'm back here behind the mic, safely tucked, and I let people like you go out and confront the ghosts. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I would be lying if I said I wasn't scared a time or two, especially after what happened. So I would go through this courtroom and let all the guests in, and then we'd tell stories about famous cases that I've gone through. And I had done this at this point. So I did this for a couple months in college, my senior year. And this was about halfway through the season. So we started Labor Day weekend and then went all the way through till the first weekend of November. So this was about, I believe it was the first weekend in October. So we had done it for several weeks at this point. Nothing had happened of note. And I'd been doing this, twice a week. And nothing had happened. I had never gotten any sort of like weird feelings while I was in there, but was always respectful and acknowledged that there very likely were some spirits or some sort of energy there that was remaining. So on this particular night, it was the second night of the tour. It was the Saturday night. So we were really just wrapping up. It was the second tour of the Saturday night. So we'd already done it once before and nothing had happened. That first time through, everything went just as it normally did. And as I walked up to the very top floor of the courthouse where this main courtroom was, there were 2 massive iron doors that were behind the judge's desk. And that's typically where I entered. There were signs on both of the doors that said doors must remain shut at all times. And those doors were never open when I went up there. So I walk up there this particular night, and the door that was on the right was open, which was not normal. And it was the door that I did not go through. So it was the door that did not have the light switch closest to it. So there was no reason for it to be open. It had never been opened at all before. And the tour guide and I had been in there already that night, and it was closed. We shut everything down just like we normally would, went back outside to meet the late tour. So it shouldn't have been open. So I walked up there not really thinking anything of it. So there were 2 steps leading up to where these doors were, just 2 like small steps. It was a little bit elevated. So I shut the door and I pulled it shut. So these doors are made of cast iron and they're super ornate. They're very heavy. I mean, a draft does not push these things open. It's impossible to. It took both of my hands on these doors to pull them open or push them open. And I'm 5'10". I'm a pretty big woman. So if it takes a lot of effort for me, wind or a draft or anything isn't going to open these doors. It takes a lot of effort. So I pulled the door shut, and then I walked over to the other door where the light switches were that I would always walk through. And as I go and go to push the door open to get to where the light switches are, I felt a hand on the back of my leather jacket. So I was wearing a leather jacket. And when you pull, like when someone yanks on your clothing, you feel that tension on
Yes.
your arms.
Sure.
And like you feel the tension of where it's being pulled. I felt that tension in my arms and on my shoulders. And I felt the impression of a hand on the like collar of my leather jacket
Mm-hmm.
yank me backwards, just absolutely pull me backwards from where I was. I don't get the door open. Next thing I know, I'm about 5 to 8 feet from where the door is, and I'm just sitting on the ground. I don't really know what happened. Like I said, I felt like I got pulled, and this isn't a situation where somebody like snuck up behind me because the floors were made of marble. Like you don't walk quietly in there. I would have heard squeaking. I would have heard footsteps, and it was also at this point 10:30 on a Saturday night. Nobody was in there except for the tour.
Yeah.
And there was nobody there. So I kind of came to my senses and looked around for a minute trying to get my bearings to figure out what had happened. And then just adrenaline took over and absolute panic. And I got up off the floor, ran downstairs. My tour guide looks at me and she said I was as white as a ghost, ironically.
I guess so.
Yeah. And she looked at me and I just kind of shook my head no. And then we proceeded upstairs. So by that point, I was with the tour on the second floor and I didn't go back upstairs by myself. So we go upstairs and we're at the main doors to this massive courtroom. So these two double doors, we then have to get open. Typically, I would be up there with those doors open, letting guests in and then closing the door behind them.
Mm-hmm.
But on this, since I didn't get that door open and I ran downstairs, myself and the tour guide had to fiddle with the keys to figure out which key was going to open the door from that specific door. So we fiddled with the keys for a minute, finally got ourselves in. And as we walk into this courtroom, you can see light coming in from from the other side of the courthouse or the courtroom. So the two doors where I typically come through, you can see light shining in. And keep in mind, there's no lights on in these courtrooms. The only lights that are really on are the floodlights that you see on like exit signs, just to kind of light up a little bit.
Sure.
And you can see light coming into the courtroom. And as we step in, I look down to the other side of the courtroom where I typically come in from, and both of those iron doors are wide open.
Oh my gosh.
So I shut one and then didn't even get to open the other one. So didn't even get through that other door to turn the lights on and do what I normally did every night. Both of the doors were wide open. And by that point, I was pretty visibly panicked. I looked at my tour guide and I went, I shut that door. I didn't even get through the other one. Those shouldn't be open. And I was in a complete panic. And of course, all the tour guests at that point were like, oh, this is just part of the tour. You're just joking. And she knew at that point, because she had been doing this with me for several weeks at this point, she knew that I was in complete shock. But she could tell that something was not right. So typically we would tag team the stories going through the courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
And that night she said, just sit down, take a breather, just relax. You do not have to do anything else tonight. So I sat there, and ironically, when we would read those stories, she would have a flashlight and she would point it up at her face, almost like you would around a campfire.
Right.
As you're telling ghost stories around a campfire. And I could see she kept looking over at me, but then her eyes kept going upward. So I could tell she was looking over, but she was reading over these stories as she normally would, but she kept her eye on me and her eyes kept going up. So we wrap up the tour, we lock up the courthouse, and as we're standing outside, she goes, I have to tell you something. And I didn't want to tell you while we were still in there. So she goes, but I want you to tell me first what happened. So then I relay to her what happened, how I walked up to the courtroom as normal, went to go turn the lights on, and then I was pushed, pulled, whatever happened. I told her I had felt that hand sensation. That's something that I still feel clearly to this day, that sensation of someone pulling my jacket backward and the tension against my arms. So I explained that to her, told her I was on the ground, and next thing I knew, I was running downstairs because adrenaline took over. So she tells me that as we were sitting there that night and she was telling the stories, she saw a man standing behind me. And he wasn't doing anything. He was just standing behind me, kind of looking around the courtroom. And based on his description, she couldn't really make out any facial features, but could tell that he was wearing a gray suit and probably had facial hair. And she could clearly see him behind me, but he wasn't doing anything. So the fact that I had a physical sensation and then that same night she saw something behind me is creepy, to say the least, because we had never had any other encounter before or after that.
Yeah,
or
that's pretty
anything that
creepy.
had happened. Yeah, nothing had happened on those tours before or after. So after, she did a lot of research for these tours, and the conclusion that we've come to is that the man that she saw was the man who built the courthouse, and that because that was always the big sticking point with those tours, is that his spirit was still with the courthouse because that's where he wanted to be.
Well,
So
I think,
based on that,
Yeah.
that's what we're thinking.
Now, the thing to me is you mentioned something very important. When there starts to be a physicality to it, when things start touching you or pushing you, I mean, my goodness, that's a whole new level. And, do you think he was angry at you guys for doing the tours? What do you think?
So we actually talked and we reconnected recently about this because, as I've started to tell this story more, we've been able to talk about the experience together because she still does these tours. She's been doing them for the last 8 years. She's never had something like that happen again. She's never seen anything. Nothing has happened. After we talked about it and she sort of remembers what she was seeing, she explains that she didn't feel like it was menacing. And I didn't feel that night that anything was like out to get me, for lack of a better term. And by the way that she describes it, I feel like he was almost protecting me in a way, that he had witnessed what had happened and then felt the need to sort of watch over me, because we weren't there doing the tour as like a malicious standpoint toward the courthouse and the man who built it. We were simply just telling his story and telling the history of how the courthouse came to me. And yes, while it might have been a money laundering scheme, we still were telling the story very respectfully. And I have never felt that it was him personally. I don't know what it would have been or who it would have been, but after she had told me that story and we had talked about it, we both agreed that we feel like there was an air of protection that he was giving.
Very interesting indeed. Well, Courtney, thank you so much for sharing your story on the show. I hope you'll get to listen to an episode. Maybe you can check out the episode that you're in. We'll send you a link, certainly. And we have a little saying over here. When we finish a story, a lot of times we'll tell the caller, stay spooky. So stay spooky, and thank you for being a part of the Campfire.
Thanks for having me.
Emily is on the line from North Carolina. Actually, her husband set her up and signed her up. Now, Emily, if you want to, don't have to, but if you want to give a first name shout out to your husband, we're glad to do it.
Oh, yeah, his name's Addison.
Addison, thank you so much for listening and for signing Emily up. And you're going to tell us about something a few months back that happened that was pretty interesting. Tell us what happened.
Okay, so a very small bit of backstory is that we just moved to North Carolina about 7 months ago. And so the house that we're in is a rental, and that's the backstory. And the downstairs area is where my husband and I's bedroom is, and there's a bit of a sitting area, if that makes sense. And this is where we have a table that has pictures of loved ones who have passed. We leave offerings, we light candles, stuff like that. We were sitting in this room one night, and I had found a spell on the internet for no more bad luck. And there's a bit of a joke, but it's also serious, that my side of the family is cursed. Every little thing inconvenient and large that can happen that is bad happens to us. We struggle with everything. And so I seriously but jokingly wrangled up my husband and told him that I really wanted to try this. And so we did. We sat in our downstairs area with the pictures of loved ones on the floor, and we lit a white candle. We inserted the candle into a lime, sprinkled it with cinnamon and also rosemary. we set that up, and then I made a salt circle. So we lit candles for the cardinal directions and also, sprinkled a big circle of salt
Mhm.
around us. And so we said the little incantation. Everything was just normal. We were, again, just kind of having a good time. And we were talking amongst ourselves, wondering whether it would be okay to get up and just carry on with our night and go take a shower, or if we needed to sit and monitor the candle and sort of be in the presence for the spell to work. So we're just talking, and all of a sudden, the lights just go out in this downstairs area. It was very quick. It was more of like a power surge,
Uh-huh.
but it didn't happen anywhere else in the house. We have 4 children, so if the power had gone out, they would have all come running. So it happened, and it was very quick, and we sort of looked at each other confused, and my husband laughed and said, "Do it again." And
Huh.
immediately it happened again. And this is cringy, and I'm disappointed with myself for my language, but I said, "Say you swear," and it happened a 3rd time. Um, Very quickly, and we just sort of sat there dumbfounded. I was so excited and confused and wanted it to be something paranormal, but, who knows? There was no bad weather. We have not experienced any. The only other time the power has gone out here was when Hurricane Helene hit.
Huh. So specifically when you were doing this, trying to counteract that bad luck. Now, here's a question. Has the luck been a little bit better lately?
It has. I will say that it has been better. Maybe not perfect.
So, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's just weird that it lined up to exactly when you were doing this. That is a strange thing. Now, would that prevent you from doing it again, or you wouldn't be worried about that?
Oh no, we've been trying other stuff down there. So definitely would do it again and have tried to otherwise, but respectfully, provoke things.
Interesting, interesting. Well, Emily, thank you for your support of the shows, and thank you for sharing your story today on the Campfire. And Addison, thank you too, and stay spooky to you both.
Oh, thank you so much, Jim. Stay spooky.
Jim Harold's Campfire is brought to you by Raycon, and Raycon wants to recognize Mom because whether it's early mornings or late nights, Mom is always on the go, doing everything for everybody, juggling work, family, everything in between. And this Mother's Day, I've got a great gift idea for her. Treat her to Everyday Earbuds by Raycon. Because doesn't Mom deserve a chance to relax, recharge, enjoy her favorite music, podcasts, audiobooks, calls, and crystal clear sound? Well, you can do that, and you can do that very affordably with Raycon's Everyday Earbuds. They're perfect for Mom, whether she's hitting the gym, busy with work, or taking one of the many phone calls she puts on speaker each day. Give your mom the gift of premium audio that goes where she does. And the latest model of the Everyday Earbuds, they're better than ever. 32-hour battery life, multi-point connectivity that lets her pair 2 devices at once. And you know what that means? That's good for you because she's never going to ask for Bluetooth help again. Now, speaking of the battery, and that's very important for me, with Raycon's quick charge function, just 10 minutes of charging yields 90 minutes of battery. And with their active noise cancellation, that's a great feature. And it's hard to find at such an accessible price point. But with Raycons, you start at just half the price as other premium audio brands. Now, they come in a spectrum of colors, whatever Mom loves. You've got the royal blue, forest green, blush violet, plus they've got their limited edition, deep red, orange peel, neon yellow, and many more. You've got to check them out. I know that I absolutely love them. Spring has sprung, and my Raycons are my constant companion when I'm taking my daily walks. It is fantastic. And if for some reason Mom doesn't like her Raycons, they offer a 30-day happiness guarantee return policy, no questions asked. Go to buyraycon.com/ Campfire to get 20% off site-wide. Right now, Raycon is offering up to 20% off site-wide when you go to buyraycon.com/campfire. Buyraycon.com/campfire. That's BUYRAYCON.com/campfire. Thanks, Mom, and thanks, Raycon. If you love the Campfire, why not get access to all of the episodes at my Plus Club, jimharold.com/plus. And now you can get $30 off your first year with our supporting cast version. So go over to jimharold.com/plus. It's really what makes the Campfire possible. And now back to another Campfire story. Elizabeth is on the line once again from Minnesota. She's a great supporter Plus Club member. We appreciate it. And she has some stories for us about her dad and signs from her dad. Elizabeth, welcome back to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks. I really love listening to your show, and I love this second visit. So anyway, my dad passed away in October of 2022. And
I'm sorry.
oh, thank you. You know, he had a really wonderful life, and we were lucky to be able to be with him when he passed. It was very peaceful, and you know, so you couldn't have asked for a better death, basically. But so that very first week after he died, I felt that I had a visit from him. I was, waking up in the morning and that kind of between sleep, awake state, and suddenly right behind my eyelids, like it wasn't in my brain, it was my eyelids. His face just appeared, and he was smiling, and I was like, "Oh." I said, is that you, Dad?
Mm-hmm.
And then like about 2 seconds later, another image appeared. That was not based on any photograph we ever took before, but it was a picture of him and I leaning back to back with our arms crossed. We had matching green shirts on, color I'd never seen before. Neither one of us owned. And a big pile of golf clubs behind us because we used to golf a lot together.
Huh.
So I felt like that was like his answer, like, yeah, that was me. And so
cool.
I thought, oh, wow. Anyway, that same week, now my mother, she has Alzheimer's. So, you know, her ability to remember everything is obviously not that good. And I think she's always been in a denial about the idea that that my dad was going to die. Like she just never wanted to talk about it if it happened. And
right.
so, you know, she has had and still continues to have confusion about the fact that he's passed. And she just was asking me within that week, well, now where is Dad? I want to talk to Dad. And I said, well, Mom, I think you forgot, you know, he passed away. And she said, no, he didn't. I just saw him. I said, what are you talking about? And she said, I just the other night, I opened my eyes and his smiling face was right in front of me.
Wow.
Yeah. And, you know, of course, I kind of take it with a grain of salt because of her condition, but then again,
the fact it was the same thing.
The same week.
Yeah, the same week and also the same thing kind of deal. Whereas if it would have been, well, I saw him making a cup of coffee or something, you might say, well, she was imagining that. But the fact that it was the same thing gives further credence. And as I understand it, and I don't know a lot about folks dealing with Alzheimer's, they do have periods of lucidity, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she's pretty in my mind, kind of the earlier stages, but I think her not remembering his death, and she does have lots of lucidity, but for her not remembering his death is very much connected to her, not accepting the fact that he died,
right,
and the Alzheimer's. So she just cannot accept it. So, anyway, that she had been living with him in a memory care facility because he also had some issues of dementia and needed extra care because of his diabetes. And so after he died, she wanted to move back home. We had not sold the home yet. And so she did. So within a month, she moves back home. My brother moved in with her and she falls and breaks her hip. So she's back in the hospital. So now she's in the hospital. I couldn't do what I usually do as a caregiver because I had the flu. I was super, super sick. And I had to actually sleep in a separate bedroom from my husband. I didn't want him to get it. I didn't even know if it was COVID at first, but I knew ultimately it was the flu. And then And then I got some bad news about my husband, and that was the fact that they found a little tumor in his brain right by his ears. So we were just like, oh my God, this is just horrible. How can all this stuff be going on? So I'm sleeping in my studio, which is connected to our apartment. And out of the blue, now this is where it gets really weird. Out of the blue, I wake up and I see hovering in the middle of the ceiling a big red orb. And it's spinning. And I even drew a picture of it because I stared at it. I don't know if you can see this.
I can.
It's a circle with circles within it.
So for listeners out there, you obviously can't see it because we're audio podcast, but Elizabeth has put up on the Zoom here, I can see a circle with it almost looks like not eggs, but circles within it. And then there's rays emanating from it like the sun almost, right?
Actually, those rays were like, there was like a tail behind it.
Oh, okay. So more like a jellyfish kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And it was red and it was about the size of like a basketball.
Wow.
And I know, like, I just stared at it for a second and I had the feeling like it was watching me.
Huh.
And then I turned away to do a double and to look back and then it was gone. I didn't actually see it disappear. But I don't know why there was something about it disappearing that made it even seem more real to me. Because I guess if I'd been dreaming and it was kind of like, and I look back, it might have still been there. But anyway, that same week after I recovered, I was back in bed with my husband, and he got up. He woke me up by getting out of bed, and so I look over and I see another globe, another orb, and now this time it's smaller, and it was like a white, kind of yellowish orb. And I knew it was real because when my husband stood up, his silhouette went in front of it. And then all of a sudden when I realized, oh my God, that really is there. This time I saw it disappear and it zooped out of the window. Okay. So I'm not really sure like if either of those was my dad. I kind of feel the first one was. I felt like he was coming in to support me with everything that was happening. But I also have been wondering if maybe the veil gets thinner when people pass and other things are able to also come through. I don't know. I'm not sure if those were my dad, but it was just odd that all happened in that week that I was so sick a month from when he died. So,
well, the thing is that I believe that our loved ones get signs to us that we can understand. And particularly that golf one is kind of cool because green, I guess, because you associate green with golf, right? Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, that was the color of it.
Yeah.
Well, so then there are two more stories.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Okay, so then, I don't know, like a couple of months later, my mom, of course, is continuing to miss him. And I said to her, after actually having listened to one of your shows about, I don't know who you were interviewing on the paranormal, but it's basically saying, like, if you want a sign, you need to ask, and you actually need to be specific so that it's a real sign. And so, something that would be specific to the deceased. And so I told my mom about this. I said, so Mom, ask him for a sign. Like, what do you think would be a specific thing? And she said, well, his middle name is Stuart. That's pretty, I said, that's great, Mom. Ask him to show you a sign in the next couple days and have it be his middle name, Stuart. So she did. She's like, James, I want you to show me a sign and it needs to be your middle name, Stuart. Well, 2 days go by. I asked her, did you hear anything? And she didn't even know what I was talking about because of Alzheimer's. So I asked my dad again privately. I said, Dad, I'm going to be a Stuart to my mom. And on her behalf, will you give me a sign of Stuart? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And within 24 hours, I get into my car, I turn the radio on, I listen to talk radio, and the first thing I hear is the guy saying, he's interviewing somebody else. He says, well, you sound just like Stuart Smalling.
From Saturday Night Live, yeah, Al Franken, yeah.
Yeah, and it's spelled the same way my dad spells his name, Stuart Smalling. So Stuart. And so I just thought, oh my God, that's the sign. It happened within 24 hours and Stuart and right when I turned on the radio. And then my last story is and the last significant one. I always get other little weird signs, but in April then. He died in October. So in April, I spend a lot of time with my mom. I'm also an artist, and I was trying to get some work done for a show, and I had to take her home. And she didn't want to go home. And we had a big fight about it. And I just said, Mom, I can't, I was very upset because she was crying. She didn't want to be home without my dad. And I called my brother. I said, can you come get her? Because I don't want her to be alone. And she's very upset. And I was feeling guilty because she was like, if my husband died, I wouldn't leave you alone. It was like that kind of stuff. And I said, Mom, I've got to get to this store before they close to get this material I need. Please just go. So anyway, my brother picked her up, and I was driving, and I felt really upset. I felt kind of like a crummy daughter, like my mom is crying about her husband, and I'd had enough of her that day. I just couldn't be around her anymore. I needed to focus on my artwork. So he took her. Anyway, a little bit of a backstory. My dad was an organ donor, and when he died, he's on a list. And there's an organization here called Lion's Gift of Sight, which basically they will harvest eyes and use the parts that they need.
Sure.
Them. So they called me like within 4 hours of his death, and I was like, can we take his eyes because we need to get him right away? And I was like, yeah, that's okay. Of course, I asked my mom, and she just was reluctantly said yes. So anyway, again, Lion's Gift of Sight is the name of the organization. And I'm driving, and I'm trying to get to the store before they close. There's 2 ways to go. I could stay on 94. I could take this side path called 280. And I'm upset about my mom. And I asked my dad, Dad, am I just a horrible daughter that I just left her feeling so upset? And I was like, and then I'm back to the road. Should I take 94, 180, or 280, 94, 280? And I said, oh, whatever. Last second, I decided I'm going to go via 280. So I take the 280 stop. I come to the first light, on the exit, the first stop. And what is in front of me but a car with the logo of Lion's Gift of Sight? I mean, this is insane because this is such a small organization. They have like volunteers who don't use their own vehicles to go get, the parts of people. And it was just like one of these logos. It was part of the car, but it was not even like a big car. It was just like a regular car. It was right at the bottom. Lion's Gift of Sight. So I just said, oh, thank you, Dad. I just felt like that was his way of saying it's okay.
And it seems like he's kind of got this mastered. I mean, they say how difficult for some people it is to get through, but he seems to have figured it out because each one of these, they're not just, they don't seem at all coincidental. They're very intentional.
Right.
Yeah.
If I have time, can I just share like the quickest, most kind of interesting little quick story about my great-great-grandfather?
Sure.
My great-great-grandfather, he too died in his bed, on the deathbed, and he was surrounded by loved ones, just like my dad. And when he passed, the last, he was staring off into the corner that even my dad was staring off into.
You hear that a lot.
Heard of it. And the last words out of his mouth was, "Open the door."
Whoa. I'm telling you, that deathbed visitation thing, that is a thing. One of the most famous ones was Steve Jobs. And, he was not exactly, I don't think he was big into traditional, Judeo-Christian religion or anything like that. But he apparently was looking out into space as he died, and he said, oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow. And that would be the kind of thing you would think he would say, because he always seemed to be a guy who, he had a hard-edged business sense, but he also had a sense of wonder. I do believe that about him. And then what's interesting is some people call him, well, he was like the modern-day Thomas Edison, although he was more of a business person, but so was Edison. But Edison on his deathbed said, it is very beautiful over there.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just that opened the door. Wow. And then he died.
Opened the door.
Yeah. That was it.
And they opened the door. Well, Elizabeth, these things are not easy, but thank you for sharing your experience here on the Campfire.
Thanks. Have a great rest of your week.
Jim Harold's Campfire is brought to you by Hero Bread. Now, I love Hero Bread because I love bread, but I don't love the carbs. But With Hero Bread, you can focus on your health goals and still indulge in the soft, fluffy experience that you love guilt-free. Whether it's enjoying a nutritious breakfast sandwich on a bagel, a meal-prepped enchilada, or buttery rolls with a family dinner. Now, their taste and texture, it is awesome. Let me tell you, I've got a little anecdote to tell you, and I swear this is true. This week we have burgers, and we had the Hero Bread hamburger buns, right? And I was about 2 bites in, and Dar said, these Hero buns, they really are good. And I'm like, I forgot. I forgot that they were Hero buns. I just was thinking that they were regular buns. I totally forgot. I swear that is the truth. I am not making that up. Because you'll be surprised, and I was too, by the texture and the taste. They've got this thing cracked. I don't know how they do it, but they do it. But it's not only the taste and the texture, it's also the nutrition. They have ultra low net carbs, 0 grams of sugar, and are high in fiber. And they've got a great range of products. Now, one of my favorites is their Hero Classic Plain Bagel with 4 grams of net carbs, 0 grams of sugar, and 19 grams of protein. That's one of my favorites. But there are things like their Hero Croissant, their Hero Cheddar Biscuits, of course, their sliced breads, their buns, hamburger buns, hot dog buns. They just have a lot of great stuff. No compromises, just flavor. And they also have these monthly small batch drops of indulgent favorites, like the popular 2-gram net carb Hero Croissant, and new surprises coming each month this year. So what are you waiting for? Well, I've got something to encourage you. Hero Bread is offering 10% off your order. Go to hero.co and use code Campfire at checkout. That's Campfire at hero.co. And I want to make sure you get that web address correct, that URL. It's hero.co. Just like that. Don't add an M to it or anything, because, people might do that from time to time. So it is hero.co. Don't add anything else to it. But I hope you get to check it out. We love it. We obviously use it. And as I said, that little story I told you, absolutely true. I'd forgotten that it wasn't regular bread. It was that good. Check it out. Hero Bread. Thanks, Hero Bread. Do you want the world to know you're a Campfire fan? Then go to jimharold.com/merch. For great tees, hoodies, mugs, stickers, and more, your purchases help make the shows possible. Get your spooky gear at jimharold.com/merch. Thanks, and stay spooky. Next up on the Campfire is Mason from Texas. Technology has kind of invaded every aspect of our life, and Mason had an interesting experience with a Ouija board app, and he's going to tell us all about it. Mason from Texas, thank you for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. And please tell us what happened.
Hello, Jim. Okay, so this is my origin story. It happened in 2013, 2014, somewhere around there. It was the school year after my mama had passed away, thankfully in her sleep. And around that time, I was interested in reincarnation, past lives, that sort of deal. And I had an Ouija board app on my phone because around then I'm like, this is a program, it's an app, it's a bunch of ones and zeros, therefore it's not real.
Right. You thought it was just amusement.
Yes, but boy, was I wrong. I was so wrong. So to set the scene, this is around lunchtime. I'm sitting with a group of friends. One of them who has dyed her hair red. This is going to be important later. So I'm there using the app, asking random questions like what's the weather, and it will come up with 8x exclamation points, 5, just gibberish.
Right.
And one of my friends, she is writing down the letters as I'm saying them out. And the question that I remember asking was, Mama, are you there? Is that you?
Mm-hmm.
The response was, ask the redhead.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. We all turned to look at my friend who had dyed her hair red, and she's like, I don't know her. I don't know anyone from your family. And what's weird about this is that my mother is a natural born redhead. She was the closest to my grandmother, and at that time, I'm clicking end and deleting the app like, no, 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 no,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, it was kind of creepy.
Sure.
I'm like, yeah, yeah. And when I said like a D towards the end, since we're a bunch of teenagers, since this is a family friend, so I'll just say that we said, "Oh heck, oh fudge," stuff like that.
Yeah, I know what you mean, Mason. I know what you mean.
Yeah, and that's basically the story. And if we do have time, I do have a second one that is much shorter.
Sure, go right ahead. Go for it.
So this story happened about 2 years ago. My mother was driving me and her to her favorite restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
and we immediately hit the brakes at the stoplight because we both hear what sounds like a teenage girl yelling frantically, "Mom, Mom!" We both look at each other saying, holy cow, did you hear that? Yes, me? I'm turning around thinking a car accident or something.
Sure.
No. What's weird is that it happened again. Week 2 comes around. Same spot, same destination, same amount of people in the car. Mom, Mom. We hear it again. And week 3 comes around. Again, same thing, but we have my sister in the car with us. When we approach the stoplight, it's quiet. We both turn around to try to hear it. My sister is like, "What are you guys doing?" My mom explained to her that we keep hearing this girl's voice saying, "Mom." And she's like, "You guys are weird." And we never heard it again.
Hmm.
Yeah,
What do you think it was? Do you have any theories? Was it like a time slip or a go? What do you think it was?
I'm thinking maybe it was a time slip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always find those so fascinating. I mean, I think a lot of times what we think of maybe as ghosts, maybe they're not ghosts. Maybe there's something like time slips. It's always interesting. Well, Mason, I want to thank you for being on the Campfire and being a loyal listener, and stay spooky, sir.
Stay spooky, Jim.
Next up is Vicky from Texas. She's been on the show before, but this time she has a story for us. Oh boy. This is one that I think, based on what she shared with me, was life-changing and frightening. Vicky, welcome to the show. Welcome back, I should say, and tell us what happened.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me back. Yes, let me just preface this by saying I'm a school counselor, and I work in a city in Texas, and I work at a high school. And these events happened over the last 3 years. I don't work at that high school anymore, but I'm going to try to be as discreet as possible. So this all started at the end of November in 2022. I went into a science classroom to do course choice slips, specifically for the juniors, where they pick their classes for the next school year. This was a science classroom. Okay. It's a small school. And so there were 3 rows, and there were 3 science desks per row. So it's 1, 2, 3, and then the second row 1, 2, 3, and then the third row 1, 2, 3.
Right.
And 2 chairs, so 18 total. All right. So the last desk of the third row, okay, from the door, so it's kind of catty corner. All the desks had the chairs on top of them, where the floors have been mopped and stuff. So a lot of them still had desks. The chairs on top of the desks. And these desks are old. Excuse me. Well, now the desks are old, yes, but the chairs they're old, and they're the heavy ones. They're not these new modern ones. Okay. That was not the case here. Okay, so this desk in particular, the kids were coming in. They were trickling in the morning, because I was going to be working with the students that day. The teacher was doing something else, and they had a substitute for her. So it was me. It was a substitute. The students are trickling in. Like I said, these were juniors, and they were taking down their chairs. So there was about 7 to 10 students, the substitute teacher, and myself in there at the time. On the second row, the very last desk, a boy and a girl went over there. They took down their chairs. And I was just about to ask the young man to take down the chair. It was only one chair on that very last desk of that last row. I was just about to ask him, and I motioned towards that chair. And all of a sudden, Jim, that chair went flying by itself from that desk, and it hit the wall.
Whoa.
And it bounced. Let me tell you, and it's, like I said, that thing was heavy. It bounced onto the lab space, and then it, of course, fell onto the floor and made this big ruckus. We were all just stunned, silent, until this little girl started screaming, and all the students ran up to me, got behind me. Some ran out the door, and the substitute, when I looked at her, she was completely white, had gone, just was terrified, was up against the whiteboard, just, like someone had like pinned her up against it. She was frightened out of her mind. I was frightened. I never experienced anything like that ever in my life.
That's poltergeist.
That's poltergeist. Like, he never, I'd heard rumors about certain things, and, it's a school, and it's old, yada, yada, so I just never even thought, of course I had to coax the kids back in, and, it's kind of funny because this one kid came a little late, and nobody would pick up that chair. I was trying to play it off. So the late kid, I told him, I said, I need you to go pick up that chair, please, and put it up. So of course he goes, very compliant, very nice kid. Of course he goes and he does that, right? And the moment he grabbed that chair, everybody screamed again. He didn't know what was going on, but I didn't want to touch that chair. I don't want to have anything to do with that chair. I know that's really bad, but it was just one of those things. Now, the classroom right next door to it, she and I became really good friends. She was a young teacher, and I'm gonna call her Marie.
Okay.
Marie moved into that classroom the following year. Now, she was not happy about this because, she'd heard about that. That was like the talk for a long, long time. And she didn't want anything to do with that room. That room where that chair flew and her room were just dark. They were super dark. And even though they had done some trimming of the trees outside, those rooms were still just dark. Her room, when she moved in there, it was freezing. You would go in that room and it was always freezing. And she was very uncomfortable in there. So I would go in there and, talk to her. We'd talk about different things. And one day she came to my office, and again, just she was pretty pale to begin with, but she was terrified. She was sweating. She was ghostly white, and she couldn't even speak. And I said, I'm calling her Marie. And I said, Marie, I said, well, what's going on? What happened? I thought something happened with a student. She told me that it was a Chrome cart, and it had about 25 to about 40 to 50 Chrome books in it. She said it moved by itself.
Oh, boy.
And yes. And this wall where the Chromebook was, they call it a cow, it was right next to where the chair had been flown, that same wall had been flown up against. So I knew that there was a lot of activity in that area there. Oh my gosh, and I forgot to mention, so my first experience when I got to that high school, there's a bathroom right next to those rooms. There's a stairway. It's the two rooms, there's a stairway, and then there's a bathroom. And it's a faculty bathroom. I was in that bathroom, and I went to the very last stall because it's the most roomy stall, and it's really for the handicapped. But shamefully, I went in there. Nobody else was in there. And all the stalls were open. There's only 3 of them. The stalls were open as I passed and I went through. So as I am, going to the restroom, I hear somebody starting to cry. And I thought, oh my God, is somebody? And I was like, hello, hello. And the crying got louder, and then it got louder. And so of course I hurry up, and I knew that I'm thinking in my mind, there was a child that was in the restroom. I missed them completely as I'm walking to the stall. And this child is in there, obviously because they're crying, yada, yada, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jim, I looked in the stalls again. I mean, there's not a lot of places you can hide in this restroom. There was nobody. There was nobody. And that was my first experience when I first came to the high school. So I was very verbal about it. And like I said, then, people started telling me, about their different experiences. Well, with that teacher, Marie, the students started telling me that, and of course, this is the new school year. The students that would sit had a seat close to that wall,
mm-hmm.
They would tell me that something would throw paper clips at them.
Oh, man.
Coming from the wall. And it still gives me, I'm getting chills. Marie didn't even have paper clips over there. It's just crazy. And the kids were like, at first they were really afraid. But then they got used to it, and they just ignored it. So it went away. But the one thing that never went away was how cold it was in her room. It just never, that always seemed to stay the same. And I do know that later on, towards the end of last school year, that was the last, like I said, I'm not there any longer, but I know that it was so cold in her class. She and I had gone to lunch, and then we were going back up to her class. When she opened that door, Jim, you could feel the heaviness, but not only that, this wave of cold wind, it hit us it was so hard that both of our hair just flew back.
Wow.
And yes, and she told me, she says, I don't want to go in there. And I got to the point that I bought exercised holy water, and I got my rosary, and I would go around, and I would sprinkle the heavy areas that this was affecting, to include my office. I would do that, and I had already done that with the whole building, But I think towards the end of the year, since it becomes chaotic, the more chaos, in my experience, these things seem to feed off of that chaos. And it was definitely back. It was definitely back. I mean, you couldn't go into her classroom without, it was so cold. I don't even know. I mean, everyone had to wear sweaters and jackets in there. It was so cold. There was no explanation for it. And we thought that because we had just mentioned it, I went downstairs and I mentioned it to the office people. I was like, hey, it's super cold and in Marie's room. And they were like, well, blah, blah, blah. So I thought maybe they had put a work order. Well, shortly after that, they heard banging, and everybody heard banging. The kids heard banging like all day, and it was up above them. And so I went by her and I asked her this like a couple days later. I was like, hey, how you doing? How are things going? She's like, oh, good. She says, it's just, the repair guys are just they're pretty loud today. And I said, what repair guys? And she said, aren't they working on the AC? And she said, because there's been banging all day. On she said on like the air system. She said it's right above us and blah blah blah. And so of course I didn't tell her, like I have no clue who she's talking about, what she's talking about. So I just went downstairs and I asked the secretary. I said, and I'm just gonna call her by a different name, Susan. I was like, Susan, did you by chance put in work order for the AC? And she's like, oh no, I'm sorry, I forgot. And I said, that's okay. I said, so like nobody should be like working on the AC, right? And she's like, nope, not to my knowledge. She's like, nobody's on campus. So just to make double sure, I went out and I walked the perimeter of the building to make sure that there were no work trucks at all. And I got back up to to Marie's room by the time the bell rang. And when the students were coming out, she told me, she says, well, she says, I said, is it still, do you still hear it? Is it still banging? And right as she said that, Jim, I heard it. They were banging. There was banging. And she says, well, did you tell them they're really loud? And I said, oh. And she looked at me and she says, don't even. And I couldn't hide it. I could not hide it. And she told me, she says, I can't go in there. I can't go in there. And she calls me by my last name. And she's like, she was basically begging me. She's like, I can't go in there. I can't go in there. I can't. And I said, don't worry. Let's get your kids. We put her in the library. We put her and her kids in the library for the rest of the day. It was she was so scared. And there was banging there. And I went back in that room after we moved her and her kids to library. I guess I was going to confront it. I had my rosary, and I had my exercise holy water, and I started, spraying it. I started, just sprinkling it and, rebuking, every demonic force in the name of Jesus. And I don't know if it stopped, but I know it wasn't there the next day. That I know.
And so did this continue on after that, though, in general?
The room was cold. Yes, the room was cold. Now, later on, Marie and we were co-sponsors of not student council. Oh my gosh, the Honor Society.
Right, National Honor Society.
Yes, and so we had already vetted everybody, and we were going to have an induction ceremony. But this was going to take place in our theater, and our theater is beautiful. It was just gorgeous, and had I guess you call it like the second floor. Is that called like I don't know if it's a balcony. There's a balcony, right? The big one, not the mezzanine, but there's a big balcony. And she and I had just gotten finished. We were just done, walking the kids, just doing a rehearsal. And she and I were up on stage, and all of a sudden I got goosebumps. And she was talking to me, and she stopped in mid sentence, and she put out her arm, and she said, I just got goosebumps. And I said, that's funny. So did I. And you could feel somebody watching us. And there was always rumors about things in the theater. And sure enough, Jim, I kid you not, when she said that, we both looked up, and I know I've never seen one ever in my life. It was a completely black figure. And it was in the doorway. Because there's several doors, but it's like a double door, and it was in the hall, it was in the doorway, and it was like looking at us, and then it stayed there, and then it slowly walked out of sight, like if it went through a wall. And we were both looking up there, and I didn't say anything, but she said to me, did you just see that? And I told her, I said, yes, I did. And I'm even nervous right now just thinking about it. And she just said, let's go. And I said, yes, let's go. And so we kept walking, and we didn't really say anything until we got out of the theater. And I asked her, I said, are you okay? And she was shaking, and I was shaking. It was just something. And she asked me, she said, what did you see? And I described to her what I just described to you. It was completely black. It was like blacker than black. It was really odd. But it had a definite form to it. Like you could see the head, you could see the shoulders.
I've heard some people call it, it's like it's a hole cut into the universe. Is that like a void? Is that what it was?
I think that would be a good way to explain it. Yes. Yes.
Except in the shape of a being.
Yes. It was definitely, yes, it was the most black thing I've ever seen. And when I told my husband about it, he brought up, I guess there's some paint that people are painting their rooms and maybe even their cars that's like blacker than black. It doesn't have any reflection. And I told him, I said, you're not going to believe this. I said, I really feel like it was blacker than that. It was, it wasn't lit up in the balcony. But it was still, that thing was so black. You could see it as well. At least I could see it as well as I could see something in all white. It was completely freaky because it was there. When I looked up, I looked immediately at it. There was nothing else that I could have looked at. I knew exactly where it was looking at me from. And apparently, and so did she. We both looked at the same exact thing. And she was shaking. I know I was shaking. Like I said, I've never, ever, the only thing I've experienced since that time, and this is really bad on me, but the registrar there, she had her kids up there over the summer.
Right.
And yeah. So of course they hear all these ghost stories, right? So I told her, I said, I asked the registrar, I said, do you mind if I take them over to the theater? And she said, no. She said, go scare them. Well, I tell you what, Jim, I saw it again. And it wasn't just me. It was the registrar's son. He saw it as well. And the lights, I had all the lights out. The kids were really doing the spooky thing. And as soon as I looked up, we were on the stage, And I was telling them about where I was. And when I looked up, I just looked up and I saw it. I didn't say anything. It was her son that said, "Oh my God." He says, "Do you see that?" And I just said, "Yes."
Wow.
And
Now we're a little short on time. Unfortunately, we have to get to our next caller. So, what was the end of this? I mean, this just kind of drove you to a situation where you decided to step away from the job. Is that correct?
yes, that was a big part of it. Yes, yes, it was just such a um, malevolent spirit. There was, like I said, I did the holy water.
Right.
I
Yeah.
did the prayers.
We did cover
Yeah.
that. Let me ask you this: what do you think it was?
I don't know. I don't know. Like I said, I will call back and I'll tell you about some different stories. I think there's some ties to a student that was hit by a train years ago, but this was darker than that. This was if it was poltergeist, the things in the theater I really feel were evil.
Interesting.
The poltergeist, maybe that was just poltergeist activity, but there was, again, I will call back about a different evil that was lurking in the halls.
Okay.
So
Okay. Well, Vicki, thank you so much for sharing your story. I appreciate it. And some story it is. And haunted workplaces, haunted schools, absolutely fascinating. Vicki, thank you for sharing your story on the Campfire.
Thank you for having me, Jim. You stay spooky.
Stay spooky. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Campfire. I appreciate it. And if you've got a campfire story to share, please sign up at jimharold.com/campfire. That's jimharold.com/campfire. And remember, although we're doing video, showing your video is totally voluntary and is not a condition of being on the show. We leave that choice up to you. And next week, if you're interested, look for the video version in addition to the audio version, as it always is. No changes there. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time. Stay safe and, of course, stay spooky. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Jim Harold's Campfire. Tune in again next time for more stories of ordinary people who have experienced extraordinary things.